Howdy, folks. Welcome back. It's John Pettipas with Part B, second video on the Pettipas and the tragedy, horrific tragedy, and the Mass Casualty Commission report. And again, bear with me. I have a lot of material to cover. I want to point out that policing is not an easy job. You don't call people over for an anniversary or invite them to a birthday party or a special Christmas dinner or whatever. It's some event. Generally speaking, many of the stuff they deal with, fit like a social worker, is the not so nice side of life. Not in all cases, but often. Anyway, they take and damning critique of police response. That is another article from Friday's Halifax Herald. Okay, damning critique of police response. Policing not been an easy job. That said, it does make something very interesting here. It says, though one RCMP officer had made semi-regular visits to Wortman's home, this is Gabriel Wortman, okay, in Pettipas, considered him a source, considering him a source for community information. I don't know if you call him as pimp or, what's that word here? Not pimp. Pimp's prostitution. Snitch. Snitch, I guess the word. Not pimp, is snitch. Okay. Considering him a source in the community. No investigation was ever conducted. No effort was made to confirm that the firearms Wortman didn't have a license to own any guns, it says in brackets, by the way. And I can back up on here. There's numerous reports of him saying he threatened to murder his father in Moncton, and that he, quote, wanted to kill a cop by a source that was told to the Truro police. I think that's the town police in Truro. He'd severely beaten his partner, common law wife Lisa Banfield, in front of witnesses in Pettipas. Again, I repeat, he'd severely beaten his wife, common law spouse, wife, whatever you want to call the lady, Lisa Banfield, in front of witnesses in Pettipas. He said he wanted to kill a cop, police officer, source that the Truro police told the commission, and he had been told, and go on and on, they'd been told on many occasions, RCMP and other police forces, he had guns, all of which were not he didn't have a license to own guns. Now, anyway, not an easy job. It does go on. It says they're recommending a degree. The commission recommends the federal and provincial governments invest in degree grant and policing programs at academic institutions across Canada, and the completion of a policing degree be required before a new officer can serve. Amen, I wrote after reading this last night. The commission recommended that the federal and provincial governments invest in degree-granting policing programs at academic institutions across Canada, and that completion of a policing degree be required before officers can serve. And that is right in the Halifax Herald's reporting, the words of the Police Commission, the Mass Casualty Commission. Now, that said, I've known people with minimal or virtually no formal education and do very well in their professions. I've known people with bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD. It means they wrote a thesis and they get to call themselves a doctor. You can be doctor of education, doctor of geology, doctor of theology, doctor in medicine, whatever. And let me tell you, some of those ones that doctors and they're in front of the name, that are egotistical enough to use it all the time, are not too bright. I'm not even going to say NTB, not too bright. Okay, and I've known people with minimum grade education and didn't have the privilege of going to school at all and have wisdom, not only smart, but have wisdom in him. I'm going to use an example of Chief Alec Goldie, who was a wonderful customer I knew. And he was the former police chief at this Sydney City Police, in the city of Sydney, Nova Scotia. And what a man, what a gentleman. And he took over after Chief John McIntyre. and he was the police chief in Sydney. He started, he worked as, in fact, I know he worked at the steel mill. Then I went to see him in his hospital room in New Glasgow when he was dying of cancer, and he had a nice thing on his side by the windowsill, and asked him, I said, that's Indian. It's my bike. There's an Indian, it's a lovely motorbike. It's something like a Harley Davidson, but probably more practical. And that was his bike, and he still had the thing from his bike. And he had it, and his daughter had brought it to his room. He wanted to have it in his room that he would have died in some weeks later. And he was a wonderful man. I went to say I'd known him for a long time, and I dropped in and we talked and he chatted. How are you doing, John? And didn't no self-sympathy in his part, and had a wonderful conversation with him. But he was that bike. He was a police officer. He came out of Sydney Steel in the 40s, and he became a police officer. And he was so well respected by the men for his fairness, his kindness, and his smartness and strength of character. His fairness, his kindness, his smarts, and his strength of character, that it was seen fit to make him chief of police in Sydney. And he was a wonderful police chief. And he would not have had a degree, so we would have lost the service. You can't always go by those degrees. That said, I was in the Dollarama in Port Hawkesbury last fall, and it was this tall, distinguished-looking, Alec Goldie's long since in heaven. But there was a tall, distinguished-looking guy, and I said, where are you? Then we got talking. Some lines are going through a big line up there. It was around the end of the mountain, Chexren, and it was a big line up. And I talked to this guy, and he said, I'm from, I think he was from Richmond County or Inverness County. He lived in rural Cape Breton, but a great guy. He said, for some reason, he reminded me of a guy that would do construction work. He was a distinguished guy, maybe a superintendent or a great Finnish carpenter or something. He said, I was a police RCMP. He said, you're in great shape. He says, a lot of the RCMP officers, I talked about Chris Letter in a video I made earlier, a couple of days ago. Chris Letter. I said, look, Chris Letter, who was the superintendent, acting superintendent, and I got another acting superintendent in Nova Scotia here out of H Division, Halifax. Oh, Halifax. Oh, Halifax. Anyway, the capital. Oh, Halifax. Anyway, I should bless myself, fart and snort. But anyway, Chris Letter, I made a snide comment that, or a blunt, not snide comment, looks like he ate a box of donuts every morning, or 1.5 or two boxes of them for the size of him. Certainly not anorexic by any means. But anyway, this guy was tall and in great shape. And he was, but trying to tell me, he said, 80, wait, but he said, I was a police officer. And I said, some of them now, boy, you're in great shape. I commented him, his great shape. And I said, some of them, they're awful. And he made a very blunt comment on officers, many of them nowadays, which I won't repeat here. And let me tell you, they're going to have diabetes or heart disease or some problems, many of them before. This guy told me when he became a police officer, I think it was 15 months he spent. Now they spend 6 months. And this is a video for another day. A police officer told me from New Brunswick that half the teachers in the school system now, in Nova Scotia's experience, shouldn't be even in front of the classroom, shouldn't be in the classroom. Interestingly, I know somebody in police in New Brunswick that told me 80% of officers he serves with shouldn't be in the police force. And this is not a critical guy. Okay, so it's interesting. But the gentleman, I didn't get his name, in the Dollarama in Port Hawkesbury, going through a checkout line last fall, that would have been going on about 5-6 months ago now, felt that 6 months is not adequate as the world changes. So putting a fellow out, a girl out in 6 months' time, they may be the best police officer ever, have great people skills, good judgment, and so on, and do wonderful. I used the example of Alec Goldie, and he would not have had a lot of formal training, but he had, again, great judgment. He was a gentleman. He was smart, and he had backbone. And that's all stuff you couldn't learn on you couldn't learn in a university. So formal academic training isn't the total criteria, but boy, oh boy, some of the people, not all, there are many officers out there who are excellent, really do their best, and are not only do their best, they're excellent. But there are some, like all professions, we have but more we should have of nurses and teachers and doctors, yes, doctors, that shouldn't be a doctor. And I'll repeat that. There are some, like nurses and teachers and doctors, shouldn't be a teacher, shouldn't be a nurse, shouldn't be a doctor, or whatever. And there's a fair number that shouldn't be in the police force. And that's a video for another day. I'm gone on too long again. But anyway, they take and just read, I repeat like I did a couple of day video, get a copy of Friday's Halifax Herald and read the articles and form your own opinion. With that, I gotta go. It's John Pettipas, and it's time for me to breakfast again. Breakfast, the most important meal of the day. I know somebody's a police officer, and they told me that a lot of police officers don't eat their breakfast. And I couldn't possibly see me getting through the morning without eating. I can't possibly see anybody doing any job, especially one as demanding as being a police officer, without eating a breakfast. With that, I gotta go. All the best. God bless. Thank you very much. Bye for now.